Welcome to The Spider's Web. The Spider's Web is a podcast that weaves together humor and knowledge in bite-sized episodes. I'm joined every week by The Soul Vacation, and I'm Spider Theory. Let's get started. Remember when we used to watch Paranormal State?
Yes.
What school did they go to again? Penn State.
Yeah.
Yes. So this was like a ghost show in the early 2000s. It was like young college kids. They'd go around ghost hunting. But do you remember on that show that they would have special guest psychics on and they would like take them to the locations? Do you remember that?
No, I don't. That's cool though.
Well, okay, so I was going to ask if you remembered one of the guests that they would bring on often was world-renowned demonologist Lorraine Warren. Remember?
No,
and she'd be this old lady and she's like, yep, there's demons here every time. Have you seen the Conjuring movies?
No.
I figured you're not the type.
Is it scary?
I don't know. I don't watch them because I hate Lorraine and Fred Warren. They're fucking awful people. So I'm here to tell you, here's all the tea about Fred and Lorraine Warren. They are scam artists. Fred was a sexual predator and a wife beater. And Lorraine is continued to scam into these movies. And even after death, these people are scamming. I think we're in the 70s at this point. And so, put into context that we have a lot of like the beginnings of satanic panic and people are trying to get people back to the church.
Push the Christian political narrative.
Yes, which is what the movie The Exorcist was for.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are all planned. And like the Catholic Church is involved with some of these movies. They have cardinals that sit in during the rating process, the official rating process. This is how it used to be. I don't know if it does anymore. There's used to be 2 cardinals that were appointed by the Catholic Church that would sit in and watch every single movie that got rated that talked about the Catholic Church. And so if they didn't approve of how you were portraying the Catholic Church, then you had to change it. And if you watch movies that have ratings that come out of Hollywood that are about Catholicism, possession and stuff, usually the Catholics win in the end. Even if there's some violence towards, like, in The Exorcist, there's violence towards the priest and whatnot, but in the end, they win. Like, religion wins. And Lorraine, being scam artists, they took advantage of this. They saw a lot of money that could be made in this, but also they had this desire to bring people back to the Catholic Church for whatever reason. They start reporting that they found a doll, like, Annabelle, the movie Annabelle. That's a scam story that they did. They had this Raggedy Ann doll that they claimed strangled someone. Can you imagine?
I'm imagining a naked Cabbage Patch.
Trying to kill a person.
With its foam hands.
Like, that ridiculous. And so they put it in a case and they start telling people all these ghost stories. They start getting hired out to research different things and, they start making good money. And, at the end of the day, the moral of every story when somebody had a bad haunting was that the people in the home were doing something that wasn't righteous. And you needed to go back to church and you needed to stop doing X, you needed to stop doing Y. It was all propaganda, right? And also money. Ed and Lorraine were involved in a lot of like some of the biggest haunting scams. You've heard of the Amityville Horror, haven't you?
Yes.
So that movie is based on a true scam that happened. We're going on a roller coaster. I'm going to need you guys to strap in, okay?
I'm ready for it.
So in the house that the Amityville Horror is based on, real people did die. A man came back to his home and he murdered his family. And he was, I think, 19 or 20 and he was mentally ill. He murdered his family. They took him away. That was that. His name was Ronald DeFeo Jr. So he killed his father, mother, 2 brothers, and his 2 sisters in Amityville, New York. That actually happens. Then this couple moves into that house and they start reporting that they're being haunted and, oh my God, the walls are bleeding and we're hearing demonic voices. And so they bring in, guess who?
Lorraine and Mr. Lorraine.
Exactly. He doesn't even deserve to be named. Mrs. and Mr. Lorraine Warren. were invited into the house, and guess the fuck what? They found that it was very much, probably one of the most haunted places they had ever been. Golly, could you believe it? Years later, the couple who lived there's lawyer comes out and says, "We all schemed together. They didn't pay me. They're liars. There was no haunting, and we did it so we could do books and movies and make money. And they didn't give me my cut, so I'm tattling."
I also think, and it's like, what motivates someone to do that? And I think the root of it always is greed in a lot of ways.
No, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that because someone came forward who knew Fred and Lorraine, and they said, Lorraine wasn't a Catholic. Lorraine's God was money. Up until the end. She died a couple years ago. But it gets worse. They're scamming, they're scheming, right? Fred takes in a 15-year-old lover, which isn't even an appropriate term. He basically starts grooming and molesting this child. He's in his 30s at this point. And this woman came out a few years ago after the first Conjuring movie came out, because those movies portray them as wholesome, and people say that it's the greatest love story in horror history. Meanwhile, when this 15-year-old was living in her abuser's house, she could hear him beating Lorraine until she was unconscious. And then they would go out and tell people that they were bad and that's why they were being haunted. Lorraine knew that her husband was raping this child, and she got pregnant at one point, and Lorraine convinced her to have an abortion because it would be too embarrassing and it would ruin their business that they had built. They weren't just going around scamming people out of money, they were hurting women and children. And I don't know how people have felt viewing some of the things or hearing some of the things. Hauntings scared the shit out of people, and those people try to legitimize that shit. And it just, I'm not saying that all hauntings are fake, but people like that make it seem like they are. I wanted to talk about this for a long time because there are probably 4 or 5 movies that have them in it or are inspired by the stories that are connected to them, and they paint them in a good light, and they're now pop culture icons and people love them. And I don't even think people realize when they're watching the Conjuring movies that they're watching Christian propaganda. And Lorraine's goal when they did their scamming was to bring people back to the church. Those movies are made by producers who are admittedly Christian, and they're scamming beyond the grave. The contract that Lorraine had the movie makers of The Conjuring sign, and this is fucking wild. So in her contract for The Conjuring, it said that neither her or her husband could be depicted sexually assaulting anyone or having sex with minors. Who puts that in a freaking contract?
People who do that thing.
You wouldn't even think of fucking doing that. Isn't that fucking nuts?
That's crazy.
And wait, have I been calling him Fred?
I swear to God, every time you said his name, you've said a different generic white name.
You know what, people? Who cares? He's Lorraine's husband, and he doesn't deserve to be named properly. I may have interchanged Ed and Fred, and really he is Mr. Lorraine Warren. I do want to name the woman who came forward with her story about what happened with Ed and Lorraine. Her name is Judith Penny. She came out in 2017, so if anybody wants to look into her story, what she said, what she went through, and especially if you are fans of the Warrens, please read her story, because I would hope you won't be fans after. And I don't think people would support this stuff as much if they knew they were giving money to Christian propaganda and fucking falling for it, you guys. You guys watch it and then you get scared of demons and hell. And then I was looking at the storylines in some of the second and third Conjuring. It's all about blaming women for not following the rules and doing what they're supposed to do. And falling in line with I don't know, what's expected of them through Christianity and shit. Typical.
It's very prudential. I imagine very similar propaganda happened with like newspapers in colonial times and things like that. Like, it's crazy that just media over time gets infiltrated and propagandized quickly.
It's like,
often for church.
what's that saying? Winners write the history books. Like Fred and Lorraine at the end of her life got to control the narrative of both her and Fred's lives, to the point where she was like, no, you're not allowed to depict the truth that we raped children, and she facilitated it. She was completely fine with it. So stop watching those fucking movies. They suck.
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah. He is awful in all the ways you can be awful. If you're going to boycott or cancel somebody, you can do it after death. Thank you for listening to the Spider's Web podcast. You can find links to most of the things we talked about in the show notes. And if you'd like to follow me on TikTok or Instagram, I'm Spider Theory, and you can find The Soul Vacation on TikTok and Instagram at The Soul Vacation. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.